The sun was starting to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the narrow dirt road that led to the old farm. She had been walking for hours, her bag heavy on her shoulder, her boots caked in dust. The air was cool and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Every step felt heavier than the last, but she kept moving. She had promised herself she would find work, and nothing, not the distance, not the exhaustion, would stop her. When she finally saw the farm in the distance, her heart skipped a beat. It was small, almost hidden among the tall trees with smoke curling from the chimney. A wooden fence ran along the edge of the property, some posts leaning and cracked with age. She slowed her pace, unsure if anyone would be home. As she stepped closer, she noticed a figure moving near the barn. He was a mountain man through and through, broad-shouldered with a rough beard and weathered skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. His eyes were sharp, assessing everything around him with quiet intensity. He paused when he saw her and tilted his head slightly, a silent question in his gaze. "Excuse me," she called, trying to keep her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm looking for work. I can do anything. Please, I just need a job." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her, noticing the weariness in her eyes, the dirt smudged on her face, the way her hands trembled slightly from fatigue. He finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "Work comes with rules here. It's not easy, and it's not for someone who can't handle it." She nodded quickly. "I understand. I don't mind hard work. I just need to work. I'll sleep in the barn. I don't need a bed. Please just give me work." He watched her for a moment longer, then finally nodded. "All right. There's work to be done, but if you want to stay, you follow the rules. No complaints. You start with feeding the animals and chopping firewood. Do it well or it won't work out." She felt a small spark of relief. "Thank you. I won't let you down." As she followed him toward the barn, she couldn't help but notice the beauty of the land around her. The mountains rose like giants in the distance, their peaks touched with snow. The farm was simple but sturdy, built to withstand the harsh seasons. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was a chance to prove herself, but it would not be easy. He handed her a bucket for the animals and a sturdy hatchet for chopping wood. She nodded, taking them with both hands, feeling the weight of responsibility settle over her. They worked side by side in silence, the only sounds being the low murmur of the animals and the occasional crack of wood splitting under her hatchet. It was hard work, but she welcomed it. Every bead of sweat, every ache in her muscles felt like a step closer to earning her place. By the time the sun had completely set, she was tired in a way she hadn't been for years. Her arms were sore, her back ached, but there was a sense of satisfaction too. She had earned this day. She was allowed to be here. She had proven in small ways that she could survive and contribute. The mountain man handed her a rough blanket. "The barn's ready for you. It's not comfortable, but it's warm enough. Don't make a mess and keep the animals away from the door." She nodded, taking the blanket and heading into the barn. The smell of hay was strong and the floor was uneven, but it felt like a sanctuary after the long day. She laid the blanket on a corner of the floor, arranging it as best she could. The animals rustled nearby, settling into their stalls. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of peace. As she sat there catching her breath, she thought about the man who had given her this chance. He hadn't been warm or welcoming in the way people in towns usually were, but there was a quiet respect in the way he handled things. He watched, he noticed, and he gave her the opportunity to prove herself. That meant something. Later, he came to the barn to check on her. He didn't say much, just a brief nod to acknowledge that she was all right. There was no unnecessary chatter, no false friendliness. It was straightforward, honest, and that suited her just fine. She replied with a small nod, thankful for the acknowledgement, even without words. As night fell, the sounds of the mountains surrounded her, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, the soft murmuring of the creek that ran nearby. She lay down on the blanket, pulling it close around her. Her body ached, but her mind was alert, thinking about the days ahead. There was so much to learn, so much work to do, and she was determined to handle it. She thought about why she had come here. Life in the city had been suffocating, and she had needed a break, a chance to find herself, to do something meaningful with her hands and her days. The farm offered that, even if it meant cold nights in a barn and long hours under the sun. She was ready. Her thoughts wandered to the mountain man. He was quiet, almost like part of the land itself, strong and unyielding. She wasn't sure what to make of him yet. He could be harsh, maybe even impossible at times, but there was something in his eyes that suggested depth, intelligence, and a life lived with intention. She wondered what his story was, what had brought him to this isolated life. She drifted off to sleep, the sounds of the barn and the mountains lulling her into rest. The first night was uncomfortable, but it was hers, earned through her own effort, and in that she felt a sense of pride. The next morning she woke before sunrise. The chill in the air made her shiver, but it also made her feel alive. She could hear the mountain man moving outside, already tending to the animals and the farm chores. She quickly got up, stretched, and went to join him, ready to start another day. They worked through the morning in companionable silence. He showed her where to find water, how to feed the animals properly, and how to stack the wood so it would dry correctly. She listened carefully, asking questions only when necessary, careful not to overstep. He was patient, though his patience had limits, and she respected that. By midday she had learned a lot, but she was still exhausted. She felt the weight of every hour she spent working, but she also felt a growing sense of capability. She was no longer just a weary traveler asking for work. She was becoming part of the farm, part of the rhythm of this place. During a break, she watched the mountain man closely. He worked methodically with precision, as if every movement had meaning. She admired his skills, his understanding of the land, and his connection to every aspect of the farm. She wondered how long it had taken him to become so attuned to this life, and she felt a desire to learn as much as she could. As the sun began to dip again, they finished the day's work. She was given a simple meal of bread, cheese, and some vegetables from the small garden. They ate in silence, but there was a quiet companionship in the shared meal, a sense that they were both invested in this place and in the work it required. When it was finally time for her to head to the barn again, she felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and satisfaction. The barn was still uncomfortable, still simple, but it no longer felt foreign. It felt like a place she had earned the right to be. She spread her blanket, settled in, and let herself rest. As she lay there, she thought about what tomorrow might bring. More work, more challenges, but also the possibility of learning more, growing stronger, and perhaps even finding unexpected connections. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to face it. Outside, the mountains stood tall and silent, the wind whispering through the trees. Inside the barn, she closed her eyes and let sleep take her, knowing that this was just the beginning of her journey on the farm, a journey that would test her, teach her, and perhaps change her life forever. The morning sun peeked over the mountains, painting the farm in soft gold. She woke early, the chill of the barn still lingering, but there was a sense of purpose in her movements now. She wrapped herself in her blanket for a moment, breathing in the scent of hay and the faint smell of smoke from the cabin chimney. Her muscles ached, but the soreness was a reminder that she was learning, growing stronger with every task she undertook. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, she saw him already at work. The mountain man moved with the ease of someone who had spent years understanding this land. He was lifting hay bales with strong, sure hands, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. He glanced at her briefly and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her presence and her determination. She started her day with the chores he had shown her the previous day. She fed the animals carefully, making sure each one had enough water and food. She swept the barn floor, stacked firewood neatly, and cleaned the small garden area where vegetables were growing. Each task she completed gave her a quiet sense of accomplishment. She realized that work like this, honest and demanding, had a rhythm and a satisfaction unlike anything she had known in her past life. Throughout the morning, the mountain man watched her from a distance. He didn't offer unnecessary words, only guidance when she needed it. "Stack the wood tighter," he said at one point, pointing to a leaning pile. "The wind will knock it over if it's loose." She followed his instructions, feeling a mix of respect and curiosity. There was something about the way he worked, calm yet deliberate, that made her want to observe and learn more. By mid-morning, she felt the first real connection to the farm. It wasn't just about survival. It was about understanding, being part of something larger than herself. She followed, carrying her blanket and a small lantern. Inside, the cabin was simple but warm. A small fire crackled in the hearth, illuminating the wooden walls and the sparse furnishings. There was a single bed and a small table with a few chairs. The mountain man moved to the bed, gesturing for her to sit. She hesitated at the edge of the room, uncertain. "You can put your blanket on the floor near the fire," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You'll be warm there." She opened her mouth to protest but then paused. The fire did radiate heat, and the cabin was certainly safer than the barn. She realized that her pride, though important, did not outweigh the wisdom of the man who had spent his life here. She nodded slowly and laid the blanket near the fire, arranging it as comfortably as possible. He didn't make conversation, and she didn't either. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was a new kind of connection, built on shared respect and unspoken understanding. She watched him tend the fire, adding logs and adjusting the flames, his movements deliberate and careful. There was a sense of ritual in the way he cared for his space, and she found herself admiring it quietly. As the night deepened, she lay on her blanket, listening to the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional distant sound of wildlife. She could feel his presence nearby, strong and steady, but not intrusive. Her mind wandered, thinking about the strange turn the day had taken. She had arrived expecting solitude and independence, yet here she was, sharing a space with someone she was beginning to understand and respect. Sleep came slowly. Her body ached from the day's labor, but the warmth of the fire and the sense of safety allowed her to relax in a way she hadn't in days. Occasionally, she would glance at him, noticing the way he moved, how he seemed at home in every corner of the cabin. There was a quiet strength in him, a depth she hadn't anticipated, and it stirred a curiosity within her. During the night, she woke briefly to adjust her blanket. The cabin was quiet except for the soft breathing of the man nearby and the crackling fire. For a moment, she considered the journey that had brought her here, the long walk, the exhaustion, the challenge of proving herself, and felt a small sense of pride. She had made it this far, and despite the unexpected twist, she was safe and learning more about life and work with each passing day. Morning came with the sound of birds outside and the faint light filtering through the small window. She stretched, feeling the pleasant ache of muscles well used, and prepared to start the day's work. The mountain man was already moving, feeding the animals and checking the fences, his rhythm steady and unchanging. She joined him, and together they moved through the morning chores. There was a new ease in their collaboration now, a silent understanding that had been built on shared effort and mutual respect. He showed her a few more techniques for caring for the animals and handling farm tools, and she absorbed them carefully, appreciating his patience. By mid-morning, she felt more confident than ever. The cabin incident from the previous night had shifted something between them. There was a subtle acknowledgement of care and concern, and she realized that trust was not given lightly on this farm. It had to be earned. She had earned it, and the knowledge gave her a quiet sense of pride. As the day progressed, she found herself noticing the small details, the way he adjusted the tools to suit his grip, the way he assessed the animals with a careful eye, and the efficiency with which he managed the farm. Each observation added to her understanding of his life, and she began to feel not only respect but also a growing admiration. When evening fell, she helped prepare dinner again. They ate quietly, the only sounds being the crackle of the fire and the occasional clink of utensils. There was comfort in this routine, a rhythm that was beginning to feel natural. As she prepared to head to the cabin once more, she felt a strange mixture of anticipation and acceptance. The barn had been her choice before, but the cabin offered warmth, safety, and an unexpected connection with the man who had slowly become a part of her life. That night, as she lay on her blanket near the fire, she reflected on the events of the day. There had been tension, pride, and compromise, but above all there had been growth. She had learned more about herself, the farm, and the man who had given her this opportunity. The mountains outside stood tall and silent, but inside the cabin there was a sense of warmth, understanding, and quiet companionship. It was a small beginning, but one that promised more as they both continued to navigate life together on the farm. The sun rose slowly over the mountains, casting golden light across the farm. She woke with the sound of birds chirping outside the cabin window, stretching her arms and feeling the familiar ache in her muscles from the hard work of the previous days. There was a quiet comfort in the routine now. The barn and the cabin, the animals, the mountain man, all had begun to feel like part of her life, even if it was still new and challenging. She prepared quickly for the morning chores, taking the bucket to the animals and checking the stalls. Each animal now seemed to recognize her presence. They nuzzled her gently and she smiled, feeling a bond forming that went beyond mere responsibility. She fed them, cleaned their areas, and tended to small injuries, noticing how the mountain man watched quietly from a distance, giving her space but remaining present. By mid-morning, they were working together on the fence along the edge of the property. A recent storm had damaged several posts, and the wind was expected to pick up again soon. They carried heavy wood, hammered nails, and secured the posts with care. The physical effort was exhausting, but there was satisfaction in seeing the fence slowly take shape, standing strong against the elements. They didn't speak much, yet there was a comfortable rhythm in their silence. Occasionally, he would point to a spot that needed adjustment or show her a more efficient way to lift a plank. She followed his lead, learning not only the tasks themselves but also the importance of precision and care in every movement. Each correction he offered was gentle but firm, teaching her patience and attention to detail. During a brief break, she watched him closely as he moved through the farm. He seemed completely at home here, at ease with the work and the land. She noticed the small ways he cared for the animals and the environment, from checking the water troughs to brushing a stubborn goat that had wandered near the barn. There was a quiet respect in his actions, a dedication to his life that she found both admirable and inspiring. As the afternoon approached, they moved to the garden. He showed her how to tend the vegetables carefully, checking for pests and weeds, pruning where necessary, and ensuring each plant had enough water. She followed his instructions, noticing the pride in the small, precise work. It was labor-intensive, but it felt meaningful in a way that city life never had. Each plant she tended and each post she secured in the fence was a small victory, a tangible proof of her contribution. Over time, she began to notice the subtle changes in their relationship. There were brief moments when their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. She caught him watching her from time to time, not critically but with curiosity and perhaps approval. In turn, she felt a growing desire to learn from him, to connect with him beyond the work itself. The mountain man, quiet and reserved, seemed to allow these small interactions without comment, and she appreciated the unspoken trust building between them. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple, they finished the day's work. The fence was repaired, the garden tended, and the animals cared for. They carried the last of the tools back to the shed, and she felt a quiet satisfaction at the day's accomplishments. Her body ached, but the ache was different now, stronger, earned, a sign of effort that was meaningful and real. Dinner was a simple affair, bread, cheese, and some vegetables from the garden, but it was enough. They ate in companionable silence, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Occasionally he shared a story about the farm, a brief memory from his past or a tip about surviving in the mountains. She listened intently, feeling a deeper connection forming as she learned not only about the work but also about the life he had built here. After the meal, they walked around the farm together, checking the animals and making sure everything was in order before nightfall. The air was cool and the smell of pine was strong, filling her lungs with freshness. They walked side by side, their steps in sync, the silence between them no longer awkward but comfortable. There was a sense of partnership developing, quiet and unspoken, built on shared effort and mutual respect. Back in the cabin, she prepared her blanket near the fire. The warmth was comforting, and she felt a growing sense of home here. The mountain man settled nearby, tending the fire and adjusting the logs to maintain a steady flame. She watched him, noticing the care he took in even the smallest details, and felt a deepening admiration for the life he had built and the skills he possessed. As night fell, they sat quietly near the fire. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the long walk, the hard work, and the unexpected twists that had led her to this moment. She realized that the farm and the mountain man had begun to change her, teaching her patience, resilience, and the value of meaningful work. There was a growing trust between them, unspoken yet palpable, and she welcomed it. Eventually, she lay down on her blanket, the fire casting a warm glow across the cabin walls. Her mind wandered, thinking about the challenges ahead and the lessons she had learned. The mountain man's presence was steady and reassuring, a constant in the midst of her new life. She felt safe here, not just physically but emotionally, as if she had found a place where she could grow and be herself. Sleep came more easily tonight, her body and mind tired from the day's labor and the sense of accomplishment it brought. She felt the mountain man's presence nearby, strong and quiet, and found comfort in it. For the first time, she understood the subtle bonds that were forming between them, built not on words but on shared experiences, mutual respect, and quiet understanding. The next morning, she woke to the soft light filtering through the cabin window. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of pine and earth. She rose, stretched, and prepared for the day's work with renewed energy. The routine was becoming natural, and she felt a growing confidence in her abilities. The mountain man was already at work, moving through the farm with the ease and precision of someone who truly knew his place and responsibilities. Together, they tackled the morning chores, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and tending to the garden. There was a subtle rhythm to their work, a shared understanding that required no words. Occasionally, he would offer guidance, correcting her technique or demonstrating a better method, and she absorbed the lessons with focus and gratitude. Each day brought new skills, new insights, and a deeper connection between them. By midday, they rested briefly, sharing a quiet lunch. The simple meal was filling and satisfying, and they spoke occasionally, exchanging observations about the animals or the land. There was a new openness in their conversation, a willingness to share knowledge and experiences without the need for small talk. The bond between them was growing stronger, forged through work, shared effort, and the quiet trust that had developed over time. As the afternoon wore on, they continued their tasks, repairing a small section of the barn roof that had been damaged in a recent storm. She climbed carefully, holding nails and hammering boards under his guidance. The work was difficult and required concentration, but she felt capable and confident, proud of her growing skills. The mountain man watched closely, offering advice but allowing her independence, reinforcing the trust they had built. Evening approached, and they finished the day's work. The animals were cared for, the fences secure, and the farm in order. They gathered firewood and prepared a small fire in the cabin, the warmth spreading through the room. She laid her blanket near the fire, arranging it comfortably, and he settled nearby, tending the flames and adjusting logs to maintain the fire. They sat quietly, the silence filled with the comfort of familiarity and trust. She reflected on the days that had passed, the lessons learned, and the bond that had formed. The mountain man, quiet and reserved, had become more than a guide or employer. He was a partner in this new life, someone who had allowed her to prove herself, learn, and grow. As she lay down near the fire, she felt a deep sense of peace. The barn and the cabin, the animals, the work, and the mountain man had become integral parts of her life. She closed her eyes, ready to rest, knowing that each day brought new challenges and opportunities for growth. The mountains outside stood tall and silent, but inside the cabin there was warmth, trust, and the quiet promise of a connection that was slowly deepening with every shared day and effort. The morning was colder than usual, with frost covering the wooden fence and the grass sparkling in the early sunlight. She woke with a sense of purpose, the events of the past days still vivid in her mind. She stretched, feeling the familiar ache in her muscles, and prepared for another day of work. The mountain man was already outside, tending to the animals and stacking firewood. He glanced at her briefly and nodded, a silent greeting that spoke more than words could convey. She joined him, moving through the chores with practiced ease. The animals greeted her as she approached, nuzzling her hands and accepting her care without hesitation. She felt a deep sense of connection with this place and the life it offered. Each task, from feeding the animals to mending fences, was a reminder of her strength, resilience, and growing understanding of the mountain man's world. By mid-morning, the sun had risen higher, casting a warm glow over the farm. They worked side by side, repairing the barn roof, carefully lifting boards and hammering nails under his watchful eye. There was a quiet rhythm to their movements, a coordination that had developed over days of shared effort. She noticed how he subtly adjusted his actions to match hers, an unspoken sign of trust and partnership. During a brief break, they sat near the fire pit outside, sharing a simple lunch. He spoke more than usual, telling her stories about the farm, the animals, and his own past. She listened, absorbing every detail, and found herself sharing her own experiences in return. The conversation was light but meaningful, a deepening of the bond that had begun to form between them. She realized that she had come to care for this man not just for his strength and knowledge, but for his quiet wisdom and steady presence. As the afternoon approached, they worked on clearing a path through the thick forest that bordered the property. The work was hard, requiring both skill and endurance. She carried branches, chopped wood, and moved rocks, learning the best techniques from him. He corrected her gently when needed, praising her effort when she succeeded. The trust between them grew with each shared task, a silent acknowledgement of their growing reliance on each other. By the time the sun began to set, they had completed the path, and she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The farm was in order, the animals cared for, and the land maintained. She looked around at the work they had done together, feeling proud of what they had accomplished as a team. There was a new understanding between them, a bond forged through shared labor, respect, and quiet companionship. Dinner was simple but satisfying, the warmth of the fire and the presence of the mountain man providing a sense of comfort she had not expected. They ate in companionable silence, occasionally exchanging a word or gesture, the ease between them growing with each passing moment. She felt a quiet happiness, a sense of belonging that had been absent from her life before she arrived at this remote farm. After the meal, they prepared for the evening. She laid out her blanket near the fire, arranging it comfortably while he tended the flames and adjusted the logs to maintain warmth. The air was cool outside, but inside the cabin there was a sense of safety, warmth, and trust. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the long walk, the hard work, the challenges, and the unexpected connection that had developed between them. As night fell, the mountain man spoke softly, breaking the usual silence. "You've proven yourself here, not just with work, but with patience, respect, and effort. You've earned a place on this farm, not as a guest, but as part of it." She felt a mixture of surprise and gratitude. The words were simple, but carried immense weight. She had come seeking work, expecting only survival and labor, but she had found something deeper. A connection, a sense of purpose, and a place where she was valued. She nodded quietly, feeling the warmth of his acknowledgement more profoundly than she could express. He continued, "The cabin is yours as much as mine. You don't need to sleep in the barn anymore. You've earned the comfort and safety here, and if you wish, you can stay here as long as you like." Her heart swelled with a mixture of relief and emotion. The stubborn pride she had clung to was no longer necessary. She had been tested, she had proven herself, and now she could embrace this new life fully. She nodded again, unable to find the right words, but the look in her eyes conveyed everything. The night passed quietly, with the fire casting a warm glow and the animals settled in their stalls. She slept more soundly than she had in years, the knowledge of her place on the farm and the growing bond with the mountain man providing comfort and peace. It was a deep, satisfying sleep, earned through effort and respect. The following morning, she woke to the soft light of dawn and the gentle sounds of the farm coming to life. The mountain man was already moving, feeding the animals and checking the fences. She joined him, carrying a bucket and a small lantern, ready to start the day's work with energy and purpose. There was a new ease in her movements, a confidence that came from knowing she belonged here and that her contributions were valued. Together they moved through the morning chores, tending to the animals, repairing fences, and managing the garden. Each task was completed with care and attention, their teamwork evident in the seamless coordination of their movements. They communicated through gestures and brief words, understanding each other's intentions without needing lengthy explanations. By mid-morning, they were working on preparing firewood for the coming winter. She chopped logs, stacked them carefully, and carried them to the storage area, while he oversaw the process, offering guidance and praise when appropriate. The work was hard, but she felt a sense of satisfaction and pride in every action, knowing that her efforts contributed directly to the farm's survival and well-being. As the afternoon approached, they took a brief rest and shared a simple lunch near the garden. The conversation flowed more freely now. Dinner was simple, the warmth of the cabin and the crackling fire providing a comforting backdrop. They ate together, sharing observations about the day and plans for the coming days. There was a quiet satisfaction in the routine, in the shared labor and mutual reliance, and she felt a deep gratitude for the life she had found here. After the meal, they prepared for the evening, tending the fire and arranging the cabin for the night. She settled near the fire, her blanket arranged comfortably while he adjusted the logs to maintain warmth. The silence was comfortable, filled with the trust and companionship that had grown between them. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the struggles, the work, the lessons learned, and the quiet connection that had formed. As night fell, he spoke softly, breaking the silence once more. You've earned more than a place here. You've earned trust, respect, and a partnership. The farm, the animals, and this life are ours to share. I hope you understand that. She nodded, emotion swelling in her chest. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of her journey and the deep bond that had formed. She realized that the stubborn pride she had held onto was no longer necessary. She had proven herself, earned respect, and now she could embrace this new life fully and openly. The fire crackled softly as they both settled for the night, the animals quiet in their stalls and the mountains standing tall and silent outside. She felt a deep sense of belonging, safety, and connection. The mountain man's presence, once distant and formidable, was now a steady and reassuring force. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the fire and the trust between them lull her into a peaceful sleep. The days that followed continued in this rhythm of work, learning, and shared understanding. Each day brought new challenges and lessons, strengthening both her skills and their bond. The farm thrived under their combined effort, and the connection between them deepened naturally, built on trust, respect, and shared experiences. The mountains, once intimidating and distant, had become a home, a place of growth and a foundation for a new life. In the quiet moments, she reflected on how far she had come. From arriving weary and uncertain, expecting only work and solitude, she had found a life of purpose, companionship, and unexpected warmth. The mountain man, once a figure of mystery and strength, had become a partner, a teacher, and a friend. Together they faced the challenges of the farm and the mountains, each day strengthening the bond that had grown quietly but firmly. As the sun set over the mountains once more, painting the sky in hues of gold and purple, she felt a sense of peace and fulfillment. The farm, the animals, the mountain man, and the life they had built together were now inseparable parts of her existence. She had found more than work. She had found a home, a purpose, and a connection that would endure. The journey had been hard, but it had led her to exactly where she was meant to be, ready to face the future with strength, trust, and hope.